This is an interesting one. I might do a deep dive on this one and do a dedicated video over it, but I haven't decided if I want to do it yet. It all depends. But I find the information to be very interesting, and I'm sure I could tie it to a lot of interesting things, let's just say. So we have a former BioWare lead says that Dragon Age the Veilguard team was being jerked around due to EA's disinterest in the franchise of Dragon Age. Mark Darrah says that 2017 might have been the most impactful 12 months in the studio's entire history. So now it went from the game is a success, the game is amazing, to the game might have problems, to the game is definitely flawed, to the game is a failure, to the game is a failure, but the studio's fine, to now the studio's being shut down and people are being fired and being moved everywhere, to now it's not anybody's fault except for EA's fault. So we have come full circle from Dragon Age the Veilguard is a massive success, and you're a bigot if you don't agree, to Dragon Age the Veilguard was a massive failure, and now it's all because of EA's fault. Holy shit, that is an amazing circle of life we just experienced in the last, 6 months or so, give or take. So anyway, let's check this out. So former Dragon Age series executive producer Mark Darrah says that he doesn't feel that EA and BioWare had efficiently supported the studio during the development and the early development of Dragon Age the Veilguard. The ex-BioWare developer shed light on his time working on the legendary fantasy RPG franchise during a recent video uploaded to his YouTube channel. His story recounts events that transpired throughout 2017, or, according to Mike Darrah, the most impactful 12 months in BioWare's history. He touches on not only decisions that affected the early development of last year's Dragon Age game, but how a change in attitude was tied to the final days of development on Mass Effect Andromeda. So my thing is, these people will do anything in order to take the blame off of the ones who should be blamed in the first place, which are the ones who developed the game, which was the game director who mismanaged the entire project. You guys want so desperately to avoid pointing blame at Corin Bush because their trans identity is meant to protect them, but ultimately it still comes down onto Corin Bush. Corin Bush was the director of Dragon Age the Veilguard. Corin Bush has blame in the reason why things were mismanaged. You guys had over 10 years to develop a video game. Are you seriously blaming EA for the entirety of the 10 years? I'm not saying EA is perfect. Obviously, EA, I'm sure, had a lot of problems related to them in the development of Dragon Age the Veilguard, but are you seriously trying to not blame the team that was behind the game itself? I just think that's a little bit disingenuous. The voice in the water says, no, they didn't mismanage it. They gave everyone what they wanted. They just didn't know what they wanted. Fair enough. Fair enough. Fair enough. So then it says, it starts in late 2016 when Darrah was moved over to the team that would handle the last stages of development on Andromeda. He says his feeling at the time was that the Dragon Age team felt jerked around and had no support from BioWare or EA. Wasn't this the same guy that said that EA plays favorites with Mass Effect? Was it him? I want to say it was, but I'm not exactly super sure yet. I don't remember, quite frankly, but I think it was Darrah. It was him, right? It was him. Darrah said that EA played favorites with Mass Effect. So I'm not surprised that he is now trying to shift blame to EA for what happened to Dragon Age, but whatever. Anyway, he says they had no support from BioWare from BioWare or EA? How would you have no support from BioWare as the team that's working on Dragon Age? I don't get it. You guys are BioWare. The hope was that Darrah could aim in getting Mass Effect out the door so the next Dragon Age could utilize more resources, though this ultimately didn't quite pan out. This was the first time where he had this leadership discontinuity, where the person in charge of a project left that project to help someone else, some other project, while the project continued to run. Darrah explained, in the case of Mass Effect Andromeda, I don't think the impact of Dragon Age was huge. It wasn't very long, but it did set this precedent as this being a thing that we could do. Okay, and it's not a good thing to do. It is incredibly dangerous to have the project run while it's missing some of its core leadership. But okay, so we already know Andromeda was an absolute garbage, like shit show. We already know that, right? Andromeda, when it released, it was meme to hell because everybody knows my face is tired. Like those kind of memes, we all know that already. So I'm not going to bring up Andromeda again as much as he wants to bring it up. It really doesn't have any precedence here. You guys had 10 years of development to figure something out with Dragon Age the Veilguard. It wasn't even Dragon Age the Veilguard. It was Dragon Age Dreadwolf, which is what people really wanted. That's what it sounded like anyway. When we heard about Dreadwolf and we saw snippets of Dreadwolf before it became this purple and pink nightmare, people were looking forward to Dreadwolf. But in any case, Mass Effect Andromeda launched in 2017, and in Darrah's own words, it doesn't go well. Throughout this time, BioWare was still adjusting to a structural change that says the team reporting to a new leadership at EA that was hyper interested in his projects and plans. He calls the change dramatic, noting that the studio's new bosses weren't interested in continuing work on Mass Effect due to its recently troubled launch. However, Darrah didn't feel like Dragon Age was getting the support it needed, even after Andromeda was shipped. So he's trying to claim that BioWare or Dragon Age in general did not get any support, even though Mass Effect Andromeda released and bombed. I got to imagine that EA was probably looking at this like, okay, we messed up with Andromeda. Let's use Dragon Age to try to bring us back and return to form. So you mean to tell me you guys really didn't get all the support in the world? Come on. I have a little bit of a hard time believing that. The former BioWare lead says he approached current EA CEO Andrew Wilson. Oh, we're name dropping people now. Oh, this is going to be good. We're name dropping people. And former EA executive Patrick Sutherland with his concerns and was reassured of Dragon Age's importance to the company, which is exactly what I said. While EA offered few resources in an attempt to maintain the studio's work in the summer of 2017, Darrah, alongside with the rest of the BioWare staff, were told that studio veteran Casey Hudson would in fact be returning. It was a major shakeup that staff was made aware of without notice. So Anthem was in between them. Makes sense. Makes sense. And Anthem felt to them as well. So it makes sense why this company has been, I guess the word I'm looking for is like run through the mud, or at the very least on very thin ice, very thin resources. BioWare hasn't made pretty much any money aside from royalties on older projects for the last 10 years or so, give or take. They've made zero money because they were too busy just getting ruined by their failure projects that have been coming out. But in any case, he says, you have to remember, I'm the second most senior person at BioWare. Darrah said Casey was interviewed and hired and prepared to be brought back entirely without me being consulted in any way. Would me having been involved in the process have changed the decision? No, I don't think it would have. But there is an immense amount of disrespect involved in making a hire of this impact and making a decision of this importance without involving the second most senior person at your studio in any way. So they basically had no faith in you. They had no faith in you that they didn't even want to bring up the fact that they were bringing back Casey. Chances are they probably wanted to replace you with Casey. I got to imagine, but, you know, that's neither here nor there. Darrah then predicted that BioWare would shift its focus to Anthem. When his concerns were shared with EA, he was told that leadership was committed to giving Dragon Age the attention it deserves. As we all know, that's not what happened at all, he added. So he's basically angry that he got secondary resources, that he wasn't told about anything happening regarding Casey, and he was angry that Anthem got more resources seemingly than BioWare, because Anthem was supposed to be their next big thing. It was supposed to be their next big IP. It was something brand new out of BioWare, and people were excited for it. It ultimately failed, but people were still excited about it. Kata says, father is here. That's pretty gay. So it seems to me that he's kind of like an ex-girlfriend that has been scorned and now can't seem to give it up, can't seem to like get over it. That's the kind of actions that we're getting here ultimately at the end of the day. And then he says Dragon Age: The Veilguard would go on to release in late 2024 as BioWare's latest AAA fantasy RPG. Despite positive reviews from critics, we gave it a 9 out of 10 in our review. EA painted his launch. How are you feeling, by the way, IGN, about that 9 out of 10? How are you feeling about that, by the way? Do you still feel like that was fairly accurate? Interesting. EA painted its launch as a letdown, saying in February that it failed to resonate with a broad enough audience. These were comments from former BioWare developers later pushed back on, with some suggesting the company should follow the lead set up by Baldur's Gate 3 developer Larian Studios, which I agree with that. Many Dragon Age developers were laid off in January of this year as the studio shifted its focus back to Mass Effect 5. So, again, I found this story to be hilarious. I think it's a coping session by somebody who used to work on Dragon Age the Veilguard. I think it's a massive coping session. I think it's one of many sessions that we have seen from their developers. Like this particular article says, there has been BioWare developers that push back on the fact that the game was a failure and didn't resonate with players. They actually pushed back on that. Imagine being BioWare and working over there on Dragon Age the Veilguard and pretending as if Veilguard was anything even remotely close to successful. But you had plenty of people that were trying to say, actually, this is a commercial success. You know that meme? They were trying to do it with Veilguard. They tried to do it with Shadows. They tried to do it with all the typical ideology video games that have to succeed in front of everybody's eyes, right? You guys don't understand. For them, it's not about being actually successful. It's about convincing people that you are actually successful. That's all it is. It's like the poor man who buys a Rolex to convince everybody else that he has money when he's fucking broke. Right? It's the same exact thing. Dragon Age, the Veilguard, Assassin's Creed Shadows, they spend their entire time trying to be like, actually, I'm very successful. Like, that's what they try to do. But that's not what they are. If you were actually successful, you would do what Expedition 33 is doing, which is announcing how many copies you have sold. That's what you would be doing. But quite frankly, you have yet to do that, and you never will do that with your video games. So actually, you kind of look like a failure. But who's really counting at the end of the day? But in any case, that's basically it for that particular topic. Let's move on to the next one.